Welcome back to the news channel of Nghe An Newspaper and radio and television on YouTube platform. Here, we share and interact about the hottest and newest issues that the public at home and abroad is interested in. And here are some notable contents.
The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry has recently expressed skepticism about the idea of sending a UN peacekeeping force to Ukraine. Accordingly, Ukrainian Foreign Ministry spokesman Hai Huiti said at a press conference on the peacekeeping mission, "In my opinion, this is still a hypothetical discussion." He recalled that Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha had previously noted that the mechanisms of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the USC, and the United Nations that have been used to monitor, for example, ceasefire agreements or other elements of achieving peace in Ukraine have shown little effectiveness in practice, that he said that we are therefore skeptical about the application of the UN and OSCE mechanisms within the framework of a peaceful solution or ceasefire. The foreign minister has repeatedly stressed the need to look for alternative mechanisms, at least in relation to the ceasefire issue. I think this is how we will interpret this statement. Earlier, Alina Bab, president of the UN General Assembly, said she could envision the deployment of a UN peacekeeping force in Ukraine to ensure a ceasefire and post-war peace if the majority of UN member states supported it. She said that if a peace agreement is reached, it should be secured in the best possible way. And if the majority of member states decide that a UN peacekeeping force is needed, then hopefully that will ensure a lasting peace. Ms. Bab, who is the former German foreign minister, stressed that if a peace treaty is signed, it must be protected to the maximum extent. And if the majority of member states believe that the blue helmets are necessary for that, then hopefully this will contribute to ensuring lasting peace. Peace negotiations must be held first. According to Mr. TK, Ms. Bab has different opinions on the possibility of the UN General Assembly supporting the end of the Russia-Ukraine war. He welcomed the goodwill of the UN and pledged to find ways to involve this body in the process of ending the conflict. On the other hand, some European politicians have previously raised the issue of the possibility of sending Western forces from Ukraine as a security guarantee in case of a solution to the crisis. Moscow has repeatedly expressed its opposition to the presence of NATO troops in Ukraine. Last month, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov stressed that Russia would consider it unacceptable for Ukraine to receive security guarantees through foreign military intervention in any part of Ukraine. On September 16th, Russian President Vladimir Putin personally visited the area where the JAP 2025 joint military exercise between Russia and Belarus took place in the Nizhny Novgorod region in the Mulino Range. This is where the final stage of the large-scale exercise between the two countries' armies took place. A notable detail is that President Putin wore a military uniform when he arrived at the Mulino Range. According to analysts from the US-based ISW Institute for the Study of War, this is the second time President Putin has worn a military uniform and appeared at a public event since the start of the Ukrainian conflict. Previously, President Putin wore a military uniform during his visit to Russia's Sea province in March this year. This is where clashes between Russian and Ukrainian forces took place when Kyiv forces entered the territory on the Russian border. According to ISW, President Putin wearing military uniform while inspecting the Zapad 2025 exercise may be intended to send a message to NATO countries to demonstrate the military power of Russia and Belarus in the context of recent escalating tensions between Moscow and NATO countries. ISW believes that this may be a message that Russia wants to send to Poland, Norway, the Baltic states, and Finland, countries that are escalating tensions with Moscow. According to ISW, Russian Defense Minister Andrei Busop and Russian defense officials also inspected the exercise with President Putin. Russia and Belarus began the JAPIT 2025 joint military exercises on 12 May. This is the first exercise held since Russia launched the military campaign. The exercise, which will last until May 16th, is intended to test the two countries' ability to repel an attack, regain lost territory, and protect the borders of the Union state of Russia and Belarus. According to President Putin, the exercise mobilized 100,000 soldiers, 10,000 pieces of equipment, including 333 aircraft and about 250 naval ships. President Putin affirmed during his inspection of the command post at the Mino training ground that the goal of the exercise is to practice all necessary elements to fully protect the sovereignty of the entire territory and counter any provocations. The Russian leader added that 25 foreign delegations attended the exercise, of which 16 countries sent representatives, and 6 countries directly sent military forces to participate in activities within the framework of the strategic exercise.
In recent days, the fact that UAVs encroaching on airspace forced NATO to shoot them down has made many Polish citizens uneasy, fearing that conflict could come to them. Early on the morning of the 10th, Ms. Al-Wisławska had just gone downstairs to prepare breakfast when she heard a loud noise on the roof of her house in Wieryki, eastern Poland. She rushed outside and saw a fighter jet roaring in the sky at dawn. That was the moment when Polish and NATO allied fighters shot down an unmanned aerial vehicle, UAV, believed to be Russian, that had intruded into their airspace. After the loud explosion, Ms. Wisławska's house was severely damaged. Last weekend, while searching for belongings from the rubble of her house, Ms. Wisławska said, "It was right above my head, flying very low, very noisy." Polish media reported that an F-16 fighter jet, while dealing with the suspected Russian UAV, fired an AIM-120C AMRAAM air-to-air missile, but it missed its target and crashed into Ms. Wisławska's roof. The Polish government is investigating the incident. There were no casualties after the UAV's nighttime intrusion. But days later, residents in this eastern Polish border region still feel scared and confused about the future. They fear that the recent events are just the beginning and that the conflict that has sown crisis in neighboring Ukraine could now spread across the border to their country. Polish officials said 19 UAVs intruded into the country's airspace when Russia launched a coordinated attack on western Ukraine on the morning of the 10th. Most UAVs fell in the eastern Lubelski province, but 2 flew to a location more than 300 kilometers from the border. At least 3 aircraft were shot down by Polish and NATO allied fighters at her soybean and corn farm in eastern Poland. 38-year-old Katina the Wigala said she heard a rather loud thud while preparing her children for school. When the teacher cancelled school that day, she learned that the sound was caused by a UAV crashing into the farm. The Walla recounted, "My son just asked yesterday if a conflict was about to happen. The children are really scared." The mother tried to reassure her children but admitted that she herself had similar thoughts. The family lives in Wieł, a village about a 40-minute drive from the Ukrainian border. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk declared that the incident has brought the country closer to conflict than ever before since World War II. Polish government has pledged to strengthen security with NATO allies after the incident. On the 13th, Polish Foreign Minister Radosław Sikorski visited Kyiv to learn about the anti-UAV procedures that Ukraine has adopted to deal with future threats. He said in a video posted on social media X, "Together we can confront this danger." Last weekend, Poland experienced a new round of alerts when Russia launched a new wave of attacks with UAVs and missiles, forcing Warsaw to scramble fighter jets to be ready to respond and close Lublin Airport on the country's eastern flank. This time no UAVs crossed the border, but the warnings continued to shake the already fragile morale of the people. In the afternoon of the 13th, Edyta and Tomasz Eksarek, a couple in the village of Grybo 6 in eastern Poland, were drinking coffee when their phones received an emergency alert from the government. They were both afraid of another crisis and annoyed that the authorities did not provide instructions on how to respond. At that moment, news of a UAV intruding into Romanian airspace appeared on the couple's phone screen. According to the Romanian Minister of Defense, NATO fighter jets tracked this UAV but did not shoot it down. It was a Shahid-type UAV that the West has long accused Russia of using in attacks on Ukraine. 43-year-old Edyta Eksor said she wants the government to organize UAV response drills for the public. Her 12-year-old daughter no longer dares to sleep in her own room on the second floor after the UAV crashed into a house in the neighboring village. She said, "None of us know what to do if we are attacked on a large scale by UAVs. More importantly, we have no shelter here. We are facing the greatest risk." The Vesoloka family hastily packed their belongings to move out, fearing the walls could collapse at any moment. They will stay in an apartment at the village library arranged by the local authorities. Many nearby residents are still waiting for the authorities to explain what happened above their rooftops last week and what they might face in the future. Due to a lack of information, villagers are trying to piece things together themselves, and many are wondering if the NATO fighter jet's response caused greater damage. The incident is dividing some communities, fueling debate about Ukraine's role in this airspace violation. Many feel more sympathetic towards the neighboring country, but others believe Ukraine is trying to drag Poland into the conflict. Some even suggest that the UAV was sent by Ukraine itself or diverted into Poland to provoke a confrontation. Yuri Inas, a spokesperson for the Ukrainian Air Force, stated that they activated electronic warfare systems that night to counter Russian UAVs, as they had done before. However, based on the UAV's flight paths and the fact that they were modified to fly further, it suggests that the UAVs that entered Polish airspace were not disoriented by jamming. Bernard Blazub, the mayor of the Wierecki region in Poland, added that more defense assets could somewhat alleviate concerns in the area. He said, "Misinformation is also a very real problem. I would like to see more NATO troops around here. We are only 13 kilometers from the Ukrainian border, so we have to be prepared for everything." A few days after the UAV intrusion, President Karol Nawrocki approved the deployment of NATO forces on Polish territory. However, it is still unclear how and when this move will take place.